So with that, let's just go ahead and begin, okay? Obviously, this is Labor Economics 3100. My name's Rick Haskell. I know that you're Amin, and Nellie, and hang on a second, it's going to come back to me, and Lindy, and
Same first letter as hers.
Nate.
Yep.
Thank you. There are actually 18 students in the class, but you'll remember from some of what you've seen that I structured the class so frankly attendance is optional. It's smart. You'll find that the students that attend the class regularly score about 17% better overall, and that's not nothing than the students that just come just for the exam reviews and such. So you're going to decide whether you're one that's here every week or not. But I think that's because of the optionality of this, many students won't attend, and because it's Halloween, some students won't attend. And I'm fine with that. I've set everything up online so that if you miss or you just choose not to attend, you should be able to get through the course. But it is more difficult because you don't have the live interaction to deal with Q&A. And more importantly, you might be able to pick up some of the metrics and the theoretical foundations of labor markets, but you'll miss some of the richness that might come from some of our discussions. And that's going to be a function of how well you guys choose to prepare and how inquisitive you are. Okay?
Who got the Starbucks gift card?
Hang on. When I look at the roster here in a few minutes, I'll remember it. But I actually do two things.
I was like, dang it.
I know. In fact, Lindy, you were one of the first ones to hit me, right?
Yeah, did I get the Starbucks card?
No, you did not. No, you did
I
not.
was the third one.
Yeah, and you were the second.
Oh,
Okay? So there is no textbook for this class.
okay.
Although you might have seen in the syllabus that there's one that I have modeled the class after, and it's a textbook that I used when I taught this class live for several years. It's a good resource. So my consolation prize for second place in this deal is if you would like a copy of the textbook, I'm happy to give it to you.
Like, I can have forever?
For real free.
I would,
Okay,
actually.
there you go.
Oh my gosh.
I know, which you might think that's a lot more valuable than a lousy Starbucks gift card, but
Oh my God,
but the resale on that's about $5 because it's not the current version, nor does it need to be, because the inference and the mechanisms and the modeling for the labor market doesn't change. Well, some of the numbers of current historical or current sociological trends do, but the foundation does not.
I'm pretty sure there are more gift cards along the way if you go faster.
I'm not so sure about that, but there are some things. Okay, let's kind of introduce what's going on in this class and what my expectations are. I'll tell you a little bit more about me. You might tell me a little bit about you, but I really want to make sure that you understand how the class is going to flow and what's going to happen here. Okay. If the five of us are here with some consistency, we're going to get to know each other pretty well. I'm all over that. All right. If you're not, well, bummer for me, maybe good for you. Okay. The flow of this class, because it is a hybrid course where you have so much, virtually everything that you need is available online, is really going to be different than most other courses. My expectation is prior to coming on a Wednesday night, you will have gone through the videos and reviewed the materials so that when you come, you can engage in a discussion about these things. This is not designed for me to stand here and lecture to you for 3 hours. Now I'm not happy to do it. I'm willing to do that, okay? It's not my preference, nor will it be yours after you've heard me lecture for 3 hours, I promise, okay? It's the middle of the business week. You guys probably have jobs during the day. Along about 7:30, 8 o'clock, I start to become increasingly more boring. And that increases all the way through the time you fall asleep by 8:30 or 9, okay? If we do this well, and if you come prepared, my sense is that within an hour and a half or so on any given Wednesday, we may be done. I'm happy to stay till 9, 9:20, whatever is necessary. But my sense is that if you've prepared, you may be done. And whether or not you prepared in advance, let's say you didn't and you chose just to come and get what you could from the class and then had to watch the videos, you're going to spend the same amount of time watching the videos. So I would encourage you to get on top of this. It's one of the reasons I feel comfortable in beginning this class a week or two into the term. Okay? Normally I actually begin it in a live class session a week into the term. This time I had to do it 2 weeks because of that ABA trip that I took students on. Once I've gone through the material in class or answered questions, I'll hit some of the high points I think you really need to know. And you'll have come prepared and we'll have had a discussion. Then I think between that and the following, I think it's Sunday night, if I remember when the assignments are due, that's when you should actually do the quizzes and the review problem. You're welcome to do the quizzes and review problem before you come to class, but you only have 2 shots at them. And your first attempt, if you don't do well, that's fine, you have a second attempt, but you get the average of the 2 attempts, not the higher, not the lower. So I'm going to encourage you to take advantage of preparation before class, participate in class, ask questions, have discussion, and then between Wednesday night and Sunday night when these assignments are due, that's when I think you should do the quizzes and review problems, when you are as loaded and prepared as possible. I think you'll find your scores will be better that way. Yeah?
About the quizzes, I think it was the first or second quiz. I did the answer, so it didn't tell me to specify a million, so I did 24, and then it says wrong because it wasn't 24 million.
Okay, good. This is part of why you have 2 shots at them. Now on that one, do you recall if it gave you the average or the high?
I think it gave me, so I got a 2 on the first one, I got a 3 on the second one, and it gave me a 3 on the second one.
Yeah, okay, so it gave you a 3 for the score.
Yeah.
I think I set up the first few quizzes, because it takes a little bit of time to get used to the methodology, right? I think I set them up to give you the high scores to the average. But after the first few, it's average. Please.
Just out of curiosity, why do you choose that way instead of the higher score?
Because if I chose the higher score, everybody would go through and look at the quiz, not even bother to answer, and then they'd go through again and answer it.
Okay,
That's why.
makes sense.
But I noticed the questions are not similar.
Well,
The
there,
second- yeah.
there is I have created a database of twice as many questions as are given each time in the first 6 or 7 of the modules. As you get deeper into the modules, because of the nature of the modules, I've only created as many questions for the quizzes as you will see at any one point. Yeah, good questions. And when you do the review problems, I believe in the review problems, which are very different than the quizzes, that the number of questions you see in each observation is the number there are. So I have, my database there is very specific. I created it expressly for just those. I didn't want to ask any others. And I didn't want to not ask those. Okay? Good questions. Thank you.
And then there was a point because you mentioned that the final isn't going to be including everything, it's just one big problem?
Yeah, so let's talk about exams real quick, and I'll talk about some of the other assignments and problems and such we'll go through. So every module has between 4 and 6 videos, and every video has a short quiz directly after it. That's the way the entire term will flow. Modules 1 through 7, which is the first set of modules before the midterm, all have 6 videos, and they have 6 quizzes. After the last module, or after the last quiz, last video, there's a review problem, okay? The review problems, as you probably noticed in Canvas, are more heavily weighted than the quizzes. So that if the quizzes kind of foul you up, or you're not quite keeping there, it doesn't hurt you as bad. So the review problem is, frankly, more important to me that you do well on it. It's more important to you that you do well on it. And the review problem is comprehensive for the entire module. Modules 1 through 7 comprise all the material that we'll deal with on the midterm exam. You'll notice by the time you get 3 or 4 modules in that every module, at least in part, builds on other modules. Okay? So 1 through 7 and into the midterm, clearly comprehensive, without question. Modules 8 through 15 are represented then on the final exam, and they're not expressly comprehensive to necessarily go back and bring in things, or the final is not expressly comprehensive to go back and bring in things from modules 1 through 7, but modules 8 through 15 build on modules 1 through 7. So while not expressly comprehensive, it's functionally somewhat so. But we'll continue to use those. So it's not like you'll have to think, oh gosh, we haven't touched that since module 2.
Is
It's like you have to know math to do physics.
You gotta know math to do physics, yeah. And you're actually gonna find, as we get a little deeper into this, that the vast majority of this course is calculated by setting two equations equal to each other. You set a supply and a demand, or a marginality of expense and a marginality of revenue, equal to each other to tease out the value of one of the variables, and then you can identify the value of the other, because you know a system of two equations can solve for two unknowns. And then there are some rules that deal with competitive labor markets, where there is no friction in the market. And there are some separate rules that deal with friction markets or ones that are non-competitive. And once you kind of get which is which and get into that rhythm, this becomes a lot easier. So here's the thing that you've got to promise yourselves and me. Once we've gone through, I think it's module 3, if setting the two equations equal to each other and then being able to graph them, simple line graphs, if that's hard for you, if it doesn't connect, if you're having a tough time with it, you have got to reach out to me, okay? I don't keep office hours here. I don't keep express office hours only for this class, but I am willing to communicate with you, and whether that is Skype, phone, in my office at Westminster, or after this class, perhaps sometimes maybe even directly before this class. I'm willing to spend whatever time is necessary to make sure you understand this stuff. If you get into module 4 and you're having a tough time finding what I'll call right now L star and W star, which you don't need to understand yet, but you will. If you have a hard time finding those things, then reach out to me. Do not let yourself get bogged down, because you'll want to kill yourselves if you get bogged down. Okay? Because once you're stuck, it is tough to recover. Okay? What's your name?
My name Hat.
Hat?
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Hat.
Nice
Is it Hat Hall?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So this is, I'm going to try and get it right this time, Eamon, Nate, Lindy, and Nellie. And there are more than 5 in the class. It's just that, as you know, attendance is optional. And it's Halloween, and somebody's mother-in-law got sick last week or something.
Are
Yeah.
you gonna go see your grandkids all dressed up and trick or treat, or do they not live in the state?
They don't live in it.
Okay, because I thought about it as I was driving here. I was like, he seems like a guy that would like to be involved with
Yeah.
that if he could.
In fact, there is literally only one thing that I like about Halloween.
What?
And that is when my children were young, I loved to take them to trick or treating. They like to dress up, and they love to run to the door. You know, the kids come to your door, you remember, maybe even have the kids. I loved that, but almost nothing else about Halloween I like. And I've got the best life in the world tonight, because I'm here and my wife's at home answering the door at intermittent intervals, which we can't predict.
Yes.
I'm all over it, okay? Because I don't love that part either, but it's all good.
Well, wouldn't that be the same when you took him trick-or-treating?
Well, no, because when I took them trick-or-treating, oh yes, my wife stayed at home.
Yeah.
This is part of what I love about taking them trick-or-treating. Eamon, you're pretty good on the uptake, babe. I like that. I like that. You're a smart guy. As you can probably tell, I like to have fun in class. You're going to find that I'm a 5-star smartass. Okay? And I will never try to harass you. I will never, ever make fun of you. Okay? But if we can't joke around a little bit together over the coming weeks, we're just going to be miserable. And when I'm miserable, you're miserable-er, I think. Okay? So we'll try to avoid that. On the midterm and the final, you'll find that you'll have quantitative problems, and you'll have some opportunity to write things down explanatory, kind of short answer, short essay kind of thing, if you will. I give you some freedom of choice on those exams. Those are going to be paper exams, by the way. Okay, you'll take them in either the testing center here or main campus or wherever it is you've chosen to take them. That's a qualified testing center that's approved for us.
But we have to schedule them.
You got to schedule them, exactly. And you can do that right now.
I tried to do it last night, it wouldn't let me.
Was it last night it wouldn't let you?
Yeah, like.
Maybe it was
would
this
go-
morning I fixed them?
We'll go all the way through choosing the date, and then it wouldn't let me choose a date.
Really?
Yeah.
Would you shoot me a quick message about that, and I'll check into it?
Right now?
Now's fine, yeah, right now's fine. I won't check into it right now, but send me a message. Yeah, because I won't remember it. So when you actually come to the exam, You'll have 3 hours. You won't need 3 hours, but I've given you all kinds of time. I don't want to be time to be a problem and you not doing well in the exam, okay? These exams are typically 3 sections. One of the 3 sections has a problem, and you must answer all the elements of that problem. And so it'll be like, I'll tell you a bit of a story, and then it'll be question A, B, C, D, E kind of thing. The other 2 sections will have probably 2 problems, and you get to choose one of the 2, okay? There's no upside in choosing both of the 2. You don't get extra credit for doing both of the 2. In fact, if you do both of the 2 and I end up scoring both and realize I took my time because you didn't follow my instruction, then I get pissed off. So there's no upside if you're doing both. But when you look at, say, section 2 and see the 2 problems, I would read them and then I would identify which of the 2 you want to tackle. If you start to work on one of them and realize, oh no, this is not the one I wanted to do, put a great big X through it so I don't try to score it. Okay, and then do the other one. So you've got a little bit of degree of freedom. And the 3rd section is the exact same way. So one section where you answer the question that's put in front of you, and it'll be very clear in the instructions on the exam. And the other 2 sections, you've got a degree of freedom. One of the things that I just hated when I was a student is walking into an exam, and in the back of my head, I knew, man, I'm on this material. I've studied this like mad. I hope he doesn't ask this one thing, because I've worked on it, I just don't get it. I'm hoping and praying, oh no, that's the first question I see, right? So I don't want that to be your experience. And I've designed the exams in such a way that even if there is a thing you just don't connect to and you choose not to deal with that one part, I still get to get a very good sense of how well you comprehend the material.
Okay. So like you get all the way till here and then it doesn't just
I have no idea why that is. That's got to be a system issue from CIS or U Online. Yeah, because I believe it was yesterday that I went ahead and finalized your access to be able to schedule the exam. So I don't know why that's not
I've
fine.
always had issues with that system, but I have found a desktop that works better.
But
on
I
a computer.
try on.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I don't know what to do there.
Well, you might know that about a year and a half ago, U Online switched to a new version of Smarter Proctor, which is the system that does this. And for me, it worked really well before that, and I've been grinding ever since. And I've been complaining ever since.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about timing on any given night. As I said before you showed up, Pat, I don't believe that if you guys prepare for these classes, that we will need to take 3 hours, okay? Because of that, I don't think we necessarily need to start at 6 o'clock. I'm happy for us to start at 6:30 if you'd like. But I want that to be your choice, not mine. I'm fine either way. But if because of work schedules, traffic, whatever it is, if you would prefer to start at 6:30 rather than 6, I'm happy for us to do that. Because my guess is we're probably an hour and a half, maybe as much as 2 hours on any given night. Which of you would prefer to start at 6 o'clock as it's currently scheduled?
I prefer to start early.
I was going to say the same
Okay.
thing. I would prefer to start
Okay.
earlier rather than later.
And Hat, I'm afraid you just got outvoted. Yeah, I know you hadn't voted yet, but there was only one option left, okay? So 6 o'clock is fine, and frankly, I'm great with that because I like to go home too. Okay, I usually start my day at about 6:30 in my office at Westminster. So I'm happy with that.
Follow-up question. to
Yeah.
that. Why is this taught at this location and not main campus?
Good question. Because this is part of the continuing education and online partnership with the U, and then none of those are taught at main campus. Yeah. Now there is labor economics taught at main campus. I think there's one section in the day, and I believe there's one section in the evening. But it's
They're not as cool as you.
well, maybe they're a lot cooler than I am, okay? But I don't teach at main campus at all. I teach courses all day at Westminster and research courses. Okay, so we've looked at that a little bit. We've looked at that a little bit. We've looked at that. How many of you have gone in and registered for or signed up for our group on WhatsApp? Okay, thank you. What's your name? Meshwa?
Vishwa.
Vishwa, thank you. And if I pronounce that wrong in the future, which I almost certainly will, A, I'm not trying to be offensive, and B, correct me, and you won't offend me. Okay? All right. WhatsApp is essentially a texting tool, okay? I use it for every one of my classes, and in fact, I require that you use it, and here's why. So Nellie, on a Saturday morning, when you're doing some of your quiz work or your review problem, you're going to have a question about something at some point, right? And you can send me an email, you can send me a text, you can call me, whatever. And on Saturday morning, I might be in my shop, I might be up on my ranch, I might be in my backyard working, and it's going to take me a while to get back to you. However, if you ask your question on WhatsApp, Nate might know the answer, and he might answer you. Right? I know. Go figure. Who knew? So, and maybe not. So maybe you ask it on Saturday morning, and maybe I see it before anybody else. I answer you, and I'll be darned, Veshwa.
That was pretty good.
Was it pretty good? Okay, all right. Veshwa then has the same question an hour later, and rather than having to ask it and wait, he sees the answer right there. So I love WhatsApp, okay? You guys have a Canvas announcement that has the WhatsApp link in it. I believe I sent to some of you that I could tell were on WhatsApp an invitation. So if you're not on WhatsApp, get on WhatsApp. If you have a hard time getting onto WhatsApp, let me know and I'll help you get onto WhatsApp.
I think most of the people got onto the wrong semester WhatsApp, because it was on the, so like in the beginning days, the WhatsApp you would have linked were for, what was for the last semester. So I got into that one too, and then most of the people got it at the same day, but then I changed to the fall one that you update.
Got it.
That's why there's not a lot of people in it.
I was originally in the summer 2018 as well. But now I'm in the fall.
Cool. That's interesting because I didn't know I didn't remember that changing like that. I'll take a look at that. Thank you. Anyway, use it. It's gonna make things more efficient for you. It also lets me answer each question once rather than 5 times or 6 or 7, or there's 18 people in the class. Only most of them will be. Let me go ahead and give you a copy of the schedule and syllabus. Again, if you'll pass that along, please, and Nate, if you'll pass those along.
I have the book because I want it. Oh, so it's not required for the class, he just gave it to me because I won a contest. Oh.
Oh, sorry.
See,
I think that's
is she being
confusing.
envious of your textbook?
Yeah.
So Vishwa and there is no textbook required for this course. I modeled the course after a textbook I used for the live version for several years. And in fact, I don't even use the textbook for the live version anymore because I've created so many of my own materials, some of which you'll see, some of which you won't. I don't feel compelled to find a way to put $150 into the hands of a publishing company and an author every time somebody takes a class. Okay? So I was prepared to put in time to not replicate materials, I didn't do that, but to create my own and then make them available to you. Obviously, every once in a while, the videos, if you start to go through them, they become dated. I think the labor market video is current as of about 2013 or so. It needs to be updated. I've just not been allocated time to do that yet. But I think most of the material you'll see throughout the modules doesn't need to be updated. I tried to make it purposely time insensitive, if you will. So let's look really briefly at the schedule that we've got.
I didn't get one of the other ones.
You didn't get it? Syllabus? Well, that's because our buddy there
Already dropped the ball.
take you out of the book of life. Yeah. There you go. Hi, come on in. What's your name?
Courtney.
Courtney, thanks. Back, will you pass these back to Courtney, please, me?
Yep.
Pretty much come up here. I promise I'm not gonna bite. Or at least I don't leave marks. And she's still gonna sit with that.
Oh, I need an outlet.
Oh, yeah, I got it. It's okay. No, you're fine, wherever you want to be. So let's look at the schedule for just a second. There are 2 inconvenient dates for you guys on this schedule. This is one of Halloween, the other one's the night before Thanksgiving. Okay, I'm just letting you know. Okay. Now, I'm also going to let you know that not only is attendance optional, as you're well aware, but you can see that I videotape. So, I'm not telling you to not come that night. I think it will be a richer experience for you if you do come that night. I will come and I will deliver what I think needs to be delivered regardless. But if people aren't here, I won't have the questions to give answers to, right? So I'll make it a little harder. But I will post these videos within a day or so of when we do the class. So my expectation is I post that video before about noon tomorrow. Okay? And it'll go into the module, be very obvious to be seen. But use it, not use it. But on that one other night that's very inconvenient for people at Thanksgiving, the resource is there for you. Okay? Yeah, please.
Just from the feedback standpoint about the syllabus and the course schedule, depending on where you navigate to it, it shows previous years. So if you go to the syllabus link in the tab on the left,
Yeah.
you'll get something from a previous semester. But if you go in the start here and you function through that, there is a previous version somewhere
Interesting.
in there, but as you navigate further, you see the correct one.
Would you shoot me a quick note, email, WhatsApp, whatever about that?
Yeah,
And I'll
that
fix
works.
that. I was away as this was all being populated in Canvas.
Sure, it's
So,
hard to.
well, and so the person that did that apparently didn't check it as closely, and I haven't checked them checking. And neither has Visual. He didn't check me checking. Okay, all right. Did I say it right? Yeah, I tried it 3 times because I probably have it embedded now. Okay, we'll see, George. So you can see on most nights, we're going to tackle 3 sections. And when I say tackle 3 sections, I'm going to hit some of the highlights, expect that you've prepared for those by having watched the videos, and then make sure you've got enough information where you should be able to answer the quiz questions and the review questions well. And well means get good scores, okay? We will have a midterm review that will be along with the module 6 and 7 on Wednesday the 14th. Your midterm exam is on Monday and Tuesday, the 19th and 20th, whenever you choose to schedule. Yeah, Ian?
Do the modules gradually get harder since the first one I did, it didn't take as much time, so I was wondering if it is like this, then why does it take longer for other classes?
So by the time we hit module 14, you literally want to cry.
Okay.
Oh.
So I'm going to tell you that the first module I think is easy. I think it's a lot of fun. Okay. The second module, marginality, starts to get a little tougher. I think the third probably has a similar level of rigor, and I think they stay that way through about module 7, maybe even module 8. I don't think they get increasingly harder. Okay. However, modules, I think it's 9 through 15, are shorter. Okay. Remember me telling you that each one has 6 to 4 videos, or 4 to 6 videos? Yes, some of them have 3 and 4. Okay, as we get further into this. If this was the live class, they would also come faster. Okay, that's why they're shorter. But in this course, the way it's constructed, they don't come faster. They're just a little shorter. And I think, if anything, the second half of the course after the midterm, I think is actually a little bit easier quantitatively, mechanically, but begins to require more intuition and interpretation. So depending upon how well you've internalized the metrics and the mechanics, that might become very easy for you. But if you're struggling with the metrics and the mechanics, by the time you're expected to start to interpret and intuit, that might become really hard. And a few of you have shown up after I said this earlier. If you start to get behind in this class, do not let yourself stay behind. Reach out to me and let's set up time and solve the problem. I've taught this course either in live or online form now, I think about 15 times. I clearly have not seen all the problems that students might develop. I think I've seen most of them at this point. I don't know how many hundreds of students I've had in the class. And my guess is I can help fix the problem that you're developing fairly quickly. But on your own, you might have a really hard time fixing it. And if you persist with struggling, you're going to get discouraged and you're just going to do worse and worse. I love this class for a bunch of reasons. I dig economics, I'm kind of geek when it comes to this kind of stuff. But I love this class because it's the only economics class that we take where I know you are a participant in that market. That what we're talking about is relevant to you and your daily condition. Nellie, I don't know what you do for a living, I have no idea what you make, okay? But I can tell you about 6 reasons, and I can quantitatively measure them, and I can graphically model them for exactly why you make what you make with what you do. That's powerful if you know that, okay? One of them is going to be our discussion of human capital investment. And human capital investment is when we invest in our own education and training, seeking to become more productive with the hope that we can earn greater income by doing so. When you have an opportunity to model that, you'll start to realize that this decision you've made to go to college, and I'm going to guess that you all work full-time or at least have other things you're doing, that's why you're here in the evening. And so it's more of a sacrifice for you maybe than it is for other students that maybe don't have that same condition. I think you're going to realize that all the questions that the population at large is putting in your mind about, is it worth it? I mean, come on, really, is it worth it? You're still going to work at Walmart when you're done, right? So I think you're going to see that that's just malarkey, it's foolishness. And you can model what your future looks like and the net present value of that. And it helps you make a decision. And I think you'll see the decision is a very smart one. And we'll see that applied to healthcare, we'll see it applied to immigration, we'll see it applied to education, and an amalgamation of those things as we go through that particular module. Okay? The exam, Monday and Tuesday, whichever the exam centers for you that you want to go to, for a while, the exam center here was not open on Monday nights. And so when I leave here tonight, I'm going to check with them to see if it is. If it's not, I will proctor the exam myself. So if they tell you, oh no, the exam center is not open on Monday night here, you can't take your exam here, say, oh, I'm sorry, Rick Haskell said he's going to proctor it himself, he'll be here. But they should already know that. That's what I typically do for this class. Otherwise, I don't proctor it myself. And if I do proctor it myself, I don't answer your questions, because I can't give you a competitive advantage over other students that didn't have the opportunity to ask questions of me. Fair enough? I tend to score your exams within 5 or 6 business days when you take them. It takes me about half an hour to score each one of them. I will post your score, and then one of my assistants will scan your exam and email the scan to you. So you can see my comments, which are all in red, and my scribbling and stuff. Yeah.
Speaking of exams, is there any possibility of maybe taking the final 2 days earlier, if you want?
Are you the one that asked me this earlier?
No.
Somebody else in the class did. Yeah, so if you've got a schedule problem, reach out to me a few weeks in advance of it at least, and let's solve it. Because there's nothing sacred about these days, okay? We're going to have the same thing come up when we do the final exam. The 10th and 11th of December. And then, again, it's the same kind of exam, it's paper, it's the same rules that I told you a few minutes ago. And then the very last day before I need to post grades for the class, your course essay is due. How many of you have read anything about the course essay yet? A little bit? Good, good. So, Lindy, tell me about it.
So it sounds like this class will be formulated around a question concerning the labor market, and then our essay will be, I'm assuming, just from what I've read, that it'll be a culmination of our own understanding that we've received from the class and having our own application and assessment of that.
Yeah, it's very good. So the course essay answers the question, why do different workers receive different wages? And everything we talk about between now and the end of this class really is about answering that question. It might answer it for Nate, it might answer it for me, Eamon, any of you. And we will be developing together or reviewing together the different models, metrics, and issues as to why one worker receives a different wage for what they do than another worker receives a different wage. Some of these are competitive market conditions, some of these are frictional conditions, or where there's a lack of competition. Okay? Maybe a monopsony, which is the input version of monopoly, rather than the output version, which is monopoly. Or maybe it's discrimination. Or maybe it's because of a labor union, or an exogenous contract, or inequality, or whatever it happens to be because of, right? And so we'll be talking about how we model those things in the metrics. And after about module 3, you're going to realize that as I'm in the modules in the video with you, and as I'm in class with you, I'm writing your essay. Okay? So what it is you give me, kind of repeat back to me 3 reasons as to why different workers receive different wages. And in each of those reasons, you tell me what the reason is, you kind of talk me through it. You give me the equational form that represents it. You give me the graphic form that represents it, all of which you've been given at least once or twice or more in the prior weeks. Okay? Here's something I can tell you about that essay that will help you do well with it. Give me a good introduction. This isn't a research paper. You don't need to give me APA-style footnotes and resources and citations. Now, if you pull something from an unusual source, yeah, give me a reference to it, right? Anything you pull from the class, online, that text, any of the materials I've given you, you don't need to cite anything. Okay? However, if it's gone outside, it's funky, then give me your citation.
Would you then start working on it?
Module 3. Yep, Module 3. Start discussing this, thinking about this, outlining this, because that's when I actually kind of start writing it for you as I speak. So the introduction, you should tell me what you're going to tell me. So here are the 3 concepts I'm going to discuss with respect to why different workers receive different wages. And then in the body of this, discuss the 3 concepts. Do it rigorously. I think I tell you that there's a minimum word count of 1,500 words, something like that. And you might read that and think, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? And by the time you get into it, you're curious as to how you're going to stay within about 3,000. Because you're going to know a lot about this. I don't think you can do a decent job on this topic in less than 2,000 words, to be perfectly honest with you. But if you can do a great job in 1,500, I'm a happy guy. However, if you meet the minimum requirements as established in the rubric, you will get you'll get like 70% of the points available for that requirement. Okay? And so if you meet simply the minimums for the whole essay, which shame on you, but if you do, then you'll get 70% on the essay. And you might remember that the essay is heavily weighted. Your grade, I think it's 25%, something like that. It's not nothing, okay? So give me a good introduction. Lead me where you're going to take me, and then take me there step by step. Show me models, metrics, equations, graphics. You're going to have an opportunity in this class to many times, provide graphic models. You can take the time in some program or Word to do out all the lines, make them pretty, colorful, all this kind of stuff. And I'm fine with that. That's obviously what I've done in some of the material you have or that you'll see. Or you can simply take a piece of paper or a whiteboard, draw it, take a picture of it, and load that picture into whatever it is you're submitting. The essay, the problem set, quiz, what have you. Okay? So you can get really high-tech about this. If you know how to do that kind of thing quickly, fine. I would not spend the time to get high-tech about it if you don't already know how. Do what is simple and that communicates what needs to be communicated. Okay? And then, for heaven's sakes, do not give me a 2,000-word essay and a 25-word conclusion. Drives me nuts. And here's why. In the conclusion, you should not only kind of wrap up things like you would expect to in a conclusion, but that's where you talk about the connective tissue between those concepts. Because for the most part, there isn't a singular reason why different workers receive different wages. There's an amalgamation of reasons. And if it's a discrimination reason that's present, there's probably also monopsony. There's some friction because of elasticity. There is some labor market abnormality because of exogenous support mechanisms or something. And each one of those are reasons, but they're connected to each other. So bring the connection together, and you're going to find that if you can do that, I now know that you can interpret. And that's what I'm trying to get you to in a relatively short period of time. Okay? So that essay is due, I think it's by midnight 15th. You submit it on Canvas. I will then have it read and scored by the next night when grades have to be due. Please.
I think I understood this word count for 70%, but what would qualify for a higher?
Good question. So I don't have a specific number that would qualify for higher.
Okay.
So when I score things like this, I go through and look at and read all of them, and then I go back and score them.
Okay.
So If the high number of words in the class was 2,700, and I'm looking for no less than 15, I go ahead and set my distribution somewhere in there from 70 to 100%. Okay. Generally, I'll tell you that anything over about 2,000 or 2,100 words will get 95 or 100% of the points for the word count. If you give me 3 models and just give me a brief representation of them, you'll get 70% of the model part. But if you give me 3 models and good representation, maybe a couple of images per or a couple of equations and images per, you'll get 100% of those. And I'm fairly liberal or generous on my scoring of those. Now, the other side of that coin is when it comes to the equational part, the hard number part on this stuff, I am not liberal and generous. I want it to be the way it should be. However, you'll see in the exams, and you'll see somewhat in the problem sets, that if you answer question 1, number 2, and you answer question 2 wrong, question 3 built on question 2. So if you use that wrong information from 2 to answer 3, it looks like you got it wrong, right? But when I go through and score your exams, I walk through the math that you've done. So if you screwed up something in number 2, and then that error is replicated, it doesn't cost you every time. Okay? So I used your erroneous input, for which you'll have gotten a reduced score, right? But I used that erroneous input in the next one, and if you got the next one right, given your erroneous input, you got it right. Okay? So like I said, it takes me about half an hour, 40 minutes to score each of your exams. So, and it'll take you probably, I give you a window of 3 hours. You won't need it. My guess is the average student takes about an hour 45, 2 hours, give or take. If you take more, that's fine. If you take less, if it takes you like an hour, stop, reread everything. The rabbit, the one that always finishes fastest, usually gets a lousy score. Okay, syllabus. I'm not going to go through the syllabus. You have it physically. I don't think there's anything in here that you now don't already expect. I give you the grade distribution. I give you the grading scale. It's all very common stuff. I give you, hey, you can expect this of me. I expect this of you. And there's the ADA policy and everything. The schedule is what you really need to pay attention to. Yeah.
So, I have another question. I noticed on the syllabus something that says optional review session schedule next to Sandy campus.
Okay, so where is this?
At the very top of the course, it says Econ 3100 Liberal Economics Fall 2018 Sandy campus. See optional review session schedule.
So this is the schedule.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it wasn't part of the syllabus.
Awesome.
It's a separate document.
Okay.
And these are our review sessions.
Cool.
So you're thinking maybe when I said review, I'm thinking about exam reviews. These are review sessions. You're going to come here on any given Monday or Wednesday night having already viewed the videos so we can have good conversations.
Cool.
So I don't have to just drone on a lecture about this stuff. I do that well enough in the videos. Okay. Any questions about any of that yet? Tell me about the labor market. How do we quantify and how do we measure the labor market in the way through labor economics? Please.
People from ages like 16 to 65, workers of the labor market, doesn't matter if they're employed or if they're not employed.
Okay, so everybody age 16 to 65 is a potential participant in the labor market, right? Good. Do we expect that everybody in there is either employed or unemployed? They're not. It might seem that they should be. If I'm 58 years old, sadly I'm not, but if I'm 58 years old and I don't have a job, you think on the surface I'm unemployed. But if I don't have a job because I don't want to have a job, I'm not looking for a job, I'm not interested in a job, I'm not unemployed, but I am part of this number, which then takes us to the definition of employed and unemployed. Nate, give me the definition of somebody that's employed.
I don't remember the numbers.
It's okay, you don't have to.
I mean, someone who has a job that they work at least some portion of the week, I want to say.
Yeah.
It was a number, I can't remember.
Yeah, and it's not even, I don't think there is a number.
Oh.
So if you have a job and you get paid for work that you are doing, you are employed. What if you have a part-time job? Are you employed? Yeah. You may be underemployed, right? What if you're employed as a cook in a fast food place, but you have a PhD in history? Are you employed? Yeah. You may grossly be underemployed. By the way, I've seen that condition. PhDs in history, by the way, not a lot of application for this, but when you do have a good application, it can be very rewarding and very culturally rich. Okay? What if I'm a commissioned salesperson and I don't have a salary, I just get commissions, I eat what I kill, but I work for XYZ company. Am I employed? I am. Even in a period in time where maybe I didn't sell anything, I didn't get paid. I'm employed. So, employed equals job. What about the farmer who is self-employed? Doesn't work for somebody else, doesn't get a salary, doesn't get so much per hour. They receive all of their annual income usually in about a week, and that's as the crop went to market, and they get paid for it. And then the rest of the year, they're still putting in a ton of time, and they're spending a lot of money, but they get all their annual income in about a week each year. Okay? Is a self-employed farmer, is that employed? Yeah, yeah. Now, there might be a bit of an interpretation issue here. So let's say that I am, let's say my father owns the farm, and it's his company, right? And he is self-employed, but I work for my dad, and he doesn't give me a salary. And frankly, he kind of pays me under the table. It's all cash. I'm probably part of an informal market in that case, but am I employed? Yeah, I am. I technically am. However, the measurement of that, the way that we measure it nationally, might miss me. But technically, I am employed. Okay? So if I've got any kind of a job, full-time, part-time, underutilized, fully utilized, commission, self, etc., I am employed. Okay? What about unemployed? How do we define unemployed? Pardon?
When you don't have a job.
Well, that would be the beginning of it. It's not the whole thing. So Vishwa, help me understand what unemployed means.
Don't have a job.
Okay, I like that part. That's good. Any other conditions? Nellie, can you give it any other conditions?
And you're looking for one.
And I'm willing to accept one. I'm looking for one. And I'm not just saying I'm looking for one. I'm actually doing it, right? Okay. So, looking for, willing to accept work for pay, not volunteerism. So if someone is a volunteer in a nonprofit and they aren't receiving income, there's no expectation of income, they're not employed. And if they're not looking for a job that would give them income, they're also not unemployed. They are outside of the labor force now. They're not outside of the population ages 16 to 65, right? But they're outside of the labor force. Please.
Follow-up question to that. Workers are working later into life, right?
Yeah.
Beyond 65 years. So I think that metric for me is a little bit antiquated. But what does above 65 full-time workers fall?
That's a really good question. And we would say, I'm not 65 yet, but let's say I'm 67, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm still doing this, which I almost certainly will be because I love what I do, okay? I'm still working. I'm employed, but I fall outside of the measurement and the national statistics. I'm not in the employment rate, I'm not in the unemployment rate, I'm not in the labor force participation rate, and you hit the word exactly, the word I use. It's an antiquated measure, perhaps, but it is the measure that we use, see, and hear about. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a change in that measure at a point in time. And my sense is that we may see this move from 8 to 18 to 72. There have been papers written about that, there's been research done about that, but the National Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the one that controls this, and the National Income Account Reportings that puts it out there, has not made that change. So these are the numbers. When you hear the unemployment rate, employment rate, what have you, these are the numbers. Okay?
So
Please
change
do.
it to 18 to 72.
I think we're going to see it go to 18 to 72. Because honestly, I'm 61 years old. My parents, by the time they were my age, were sitting on a couch and had little activity. Your grandparents, you may be at the same situation. I hope that today's 60 is the new 40. I hope that, right? You can tell why I hope. Hey, I'm terribly active. I just spent 3 weeks in Europe. I'm going to be in Europe for 6 weeks in June and July, hiking the Camino de Santiago. I'm taking my granddaughter, and we're hiking over the Pyrenees, and we're going to have a great time. So none of this retire at 65 stuff for me. That's just not going to happen. Okay.
I was curious, so I understand why moving up to 72 in light of that, but why would they shift it from 16 to 18?
Really good question. When this measure was put in place, Nate, the average American youth didn't complete high school, and today they do. And by 65, most people were just worn out. And today, the metric has changed some for a lot of reasons. Healthcare, the organization of work, working conditions, etc. So a lot of it has changed. Yeah, when this was put in place, only something like 35% of 18-year-olds had graduated from high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
Right?
that's a big shift then.
Well, and a part of it is we moved from an agrarian economy to a service and a production economy, and then primarily to a service economy. But this was put in place when we were an agrarian economy.
When was that?
1936-ish, something like that.
It's been a minute then.
Yeah, it's been, yeah. So that when I say antiquated, I'm not a woofing, right? Antiquated. Please, Lindy.
So does retirement play any influence into these statistics? Like, does that, like, if someone retires, but then they decide, like, oh, I still want to work, I'm going to retire from working in the, law enforcement field or whatever, which a public service, but then I want to go back and maybe, teach at the jail or do something else part-time, does that influence the...
Sure it does. And let's talk about a couple of the ways that influence is observable, okay? And I'll use myself as an example because I'm kind of like the example you just gave. When I was 50 years old, I sold an investment firm. And I had developed an investment firm over about 30 years, 25 years or so. I had developed a couple of private equity funds. I had an opportunity to sell them and have a nice exit. I agreed to do that, and at 52, I stepped away from that firm and was a reasonably happy guy because I stepped into a doctoral program in economics. Okay? Technically, I retired, right? Not so much with the retirement for me. I worked 60 plus hours a week and dig it. Okay? So technically, I retired, but I wasn't retired in terms of falling outside of this. Okay? And so if I'm a firefighter and I take my pension, or if I retire after my 20 years and then choose to become something else, and maybe I choose to become something else after that, I am not one of the retired part of the population until I've stopped working and receiving an income. And retired, gosh, it's come to mean so much, so many things now, right? So that's kind of an amorphous term for us. Okay, good question though. So let's think about some numbers real quick, and let's assume a population. It'll be a simple population. It's not going to be 311 million. Okay. So let's say we got a population ages 16 to 65, and there are 1,000 people in that population. Male, female, smart, not so smart, felonious, law-abiding, drug addicted, not, handicapped, not. I mean, the entirety of the population. Because I didn't say only the part of the population that looks like they're capable of working. I said the entire population, ages 16 through 65. Do we expect to have 100% of those people working? No. We don't even expect 100% of them to be employed or unemployed, right? We know some percentage of them will purposely not be in the labor force. So the labor force definition then needs to be thought about. The labor force is equal to the unemployed plus the employed. Okay? Notice I didn't include in that the people that don't have a job and are not unemployed. I'm in college, and I don't have a job purposely because my job happens to be going to college, perhaps. Okay? I'm incarcerated. I have a drug addiction problem. I'm in an institution, I'm handicapped. I retired early. I was fortunate. There's 1,000 permutations on this, right? I'm not in the labor force if I'm not either unemployed the way we defined it or employed. Okay? So let's say in this case that unemployed is equal to 35 people. Employed is equal then to, let's say, 665, which I think means the labor force is equal to 700, if I did my math right. Just like you look like you're very smart. You might have to check me in math. Well, what's my labor force participation rate? Well, the labor force participation rate is going to be the number in the labor force divided by the population, 16 to 65. So it's going to be then 70%. By the way, when you are calculating numbers for some of the metrics that you'll do in the different modules, I'm going to implore, beg, plead you to always round or always carry things out to 4 decimal places. Why do I like 4 decimal places? Any ideas? Let's assume that I've got a quotient, and maybe it was, I'll use this one for example. Maybe it wasn't 700, maybe it was 723, okay, over 1,000. If I brought that out to 2 decimal places, it would be 7.72, right, or 72%. If I took it out to 4 decimal places, it would be 7.230. Is there a big difference between 72 and 72.3%? It's a third of a percent. Come on, it's a rounding error, right? Well, if there's 1,000 people, there's not a big difference, right? What if there's 311 million people? Is it a big difference? Yeah. It's a huge difference, okay? And very often you're going to be looking at values that then need to be interpreted as percentages. So if you round to 4 decimal, or if you keep your calculator to 4 decimal places and then turn it into a percentage, you still have accuracy out to 2 decimal places. That's why. Okay. What's our current labor force participation rate? Any ideas? Yeah, we're a little north of that. We're about 66.5%, 66.7%, give or take. I believe that when I initially put these videos together, we were closer to 67%. We backed off a little bit.
Is that nationally?
That's nationally, yeah. I don't know what the state of Utah is.
I know it's difficult to find people right now. We get really low unemployment, but as far as the labor force, I mean.
Yeah, and my sense is nationally probably is mirrored in most states. I don't know if it is in Utah. Utah's a little bit of a different state, right? How many of you are born and raised in Utah? Okay, a couple of you. So the rest of you, like me, came from somewhere else. Utah's a little bit of a different state, you know? Yeah. We've got this whole self-reliance thing. There's a ton of self-employment here, but there's also a greater preponderance of stay-at-home spouses. Used to be that we always said stay-at-home mom, but not so much anymore, right? Stay-at-home spouse or stay-at-home parent, for that matter. Maybe not even a spouse, right? So we're a little bit different, but I think we've kind of followed most of the national trends, maybe at a different level, right? Our country had a labor force participation rate of about 52% prior to World War II. And during World War II, it expanded dramatically, not to 67 or 70%. A dramatic expansion when you have millions of people can be 5 percentage points or 2 percentage points, right? And we expanded dramatically as so many of our capable men went into the war effort, and so capable women stepped in and to make up the slack both in terms of household incomes and working on the farm and running the family business, which there was a lot more farm and family business then than there is now as a percentage of activity. But also, there were just greater opportunities for women than there had ever been. Prior to that, you might have been a woman that was capable, smart, maybe even educated, but the ability to get a decent job was really limited. And during the war, that really expanded. And our labor force participation rate expanded at the same time. And interestingly enough, even though it did go down a little bit after the end of the war, the vast majority of those females that entered the workforce stayed in the workforce. It went down largely because the population was growing, not because the people had left the labor force. Now some did. We hear about Rosie the Riveter. You know, she went to work in a submarine or an airplane factory, and after her beau comes home from the war, her husband comes home from the war, she goes back and puts on her apron and such. That is so 1940s. That's not so much 1970s, certainly not 2000 and anything, right? Okay. Our landscape changes. And I think most of us would agree that it changes for the better, right? So after the war, it kind of receded a little bit, but then from its little dip, it just starts to march up all the way through the end of the 1970s. Greater participation in education by females, greater participation in education by minorities, greater opportunities for both, and typically just as many opportunities for what had been the dominant worker force, and that was white males, right? Health conditions are improving during those years. So people are able to work longer, not necessarily longer each day, because unionization is happening at the same time at a great clip, and so we're actually starting to reduce the number of hours a day people work. Automation is helping us even on the farm not have to work from sun up to sundown anymore, and in self-employed businesses. But we reach a peak at about 1978, 1979, and then we start to come down. And our peak was about 73 or 74%, and so today we sit a little bit less than 70 or 67%.
Is it estimated to go up or down?
Good question. I think most of us think it will continue to go down. I think it will go down at a lesser decline, though. Okay.
Is it because of automation?
It's because of many things, and let's articulate a few of them. So I think it's going down because we have more and more social support systems, such that the safety net that is available if you aren't working and you leave the labor force is a little more generous today than it was at some points in time. I'm thinking about disability, I'm thinking about Social Security, I'm not thinking about welfare, right? Because welfare is not more generous today, at least in this country, than it has been in times past. I think there are some other alternatives that are satisfying, that motivate people to say, well, if I can afford to go participate in this dream thing and not be in the labor force, I might choose to do that. I'd rather have the utility and satisfaction by chasing that dream rather than having a paycheck. Yeah.
Does it mean like socialist countries have the lowest participation rate?
Yeah, the greater the social welfare system in an organized, developed economy, the lesser the labor force participation rate. And it's very, very correlated.
That's bad for the country.
Well, you know, that's the argument. It certainly is bad for the company's productivity and GDP changes and such, but we would say it's bad for the country because our value system places greater value on productivity than it does personal satisfaction and utility. But I was just in Italy, terrible labor force participation rate. And in Italy, they take 5 weeks off every summer. And as I was getting ready for this trip, I was told that. Because one of the things that we did getting ready for that trip is I set up business visits for us throughout the country, right? And in the 5 weeks that is, I think it was July and the first week of August, if I remember correctly, so right in the middle of when I'm trying to set up business visits, I'm having a hard time getting a hold of people. And I'm hearing the people that I am talking to say, well, no, the whole country shuts down. And I'm thinking this is a joke at first. Because to me, that's laughable, right? It's not a joke. In fact, I talked to one of the two owners of a company by the name of Mappe while I was there, and Mappe produces an adhesive product used in tile setting, mortar, grout, and some commercial concrete applications. And this company's about 2.6, 2.8 billion in revenues each year, so it's not nothing. This is a big company. And I said, her name was Veronica. So Veronica, how do you function as a business when you take 5 weeks off during the year? Your phones don't get answered, your doors are closed, and they distribute products all over the world, right? So way outside of this little rarefied area that takes 5 weeks off. And her response to me is, well, how do you operate one when you don't? Because culturally, if their expectation is, if you don't let everybody have time off at the same time, then what you're suffering is, in our business of 8 or 9 people here, Nate's off 1 week, and I'm suffering because I can't get a hold of him, and because Eamon and I need him. So they think that one of the best parts about this is everybody's off at the same time, so you never suffer with that problem, right? Which, there might be some merit to that. And if everybody takes 4 or 5 weeks off each year, you come back refreshed, ready to go. There might be some merit, but their productivity
Is that in all of
is.
Europe or just
That particular phenomena is largely an Italian phenomenon. It permeates part of Spain, part of France, but largely an Italian phenomenon. Isn't it interesting? I don't know where it came from. I don't care where it came from. And I'm glad I don't have to be subject to it. Because I kind of like it.
Will there be a chapter that we focus on, like the current work schedule and the evolution of that and how
Not
it's
really.
changed? Okay.
Not really. I mean, if there's a master's level class that you might choose to take that might, and there's certainly a doctoral level class when you get into that, but you all don't need to worry about that. There's enough. We're going to do a lot. We're going to do a lot. So we've seen it kind of back off. I think one of the reasons it's backed off is because the baby boomers, my generation, worked hard, had some really nice income generating years, especially when income inequality was not in the condition it's in now, before inflation started to rob us of some things, if you will. And we had this ideal, if I can retire early, right? I want to retire early so I can be satisfied and enjoy some of my life. Well, like my parents and grandparents were able to. Well, that retirement early, because we amassed the resources to be able to do so, causes us to have alternatives, lets us step out of the labor force prior to age 65. Pat, where were you raised? Were you born and raised in this country or elsewhere?
I'm sorry?
Where were you born and raised?
Vietnam.
Vietnam, okay. And in Vietnam, do you have any sense of what the labor force is like? Is it very productive or very not? Do you have any ideas? It's okay if you don't.
I have no idea about that.
Okay, all right. I'm actually going to be in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City and then Bangkok in a number of months. Same kind of trip, looking at businesses and such. So I'm really kind of curious. Anyway, so labor force participation is a big deal. Let's talk a little bit more about unemployment. There are 4 types of unemployment. Structural, frictional, cyclical, and seasonal. These 2 types together create the natural rate. What does structural unemployment mean? Who can define it for me?
maybe like when you didn't quit your job, you just laid off like a month and then want to go get another job.
It's more frictional. It's actually frictional.
I can feel it.
By the way, sometimes I will ask you a question and you'll give me the answer and I will challenge you on the answer. I won't do what I just did. I'll challenge you. It's because you're right. I will never challenge you if you're wrong. Okay? I might adjust you if you're not quite right. Okay? Look at you got Nate.
Is structural where there's not enough for everyone that wants a job? Or is that
Not necessarily, although possibly. Structural unemployment is the level of unemployment we have because of exogenous forces, largely macroeconomic decisions made at the federal or state level. So when interest rates are increased by the Federal Reserve, input costs for businesses go up, prices go up, consumer demand for prices go down, people get laid off that used to do that work. Okay? That's not because of a boss making a decision. It's not because it's winter and not summer. It's because of an exogenous state or federal level decision that informed the structure of the economy, which affects the structure and the workings of the firm. Okay? So those things that are because of the structure of the economy, legislation, policy, etc., are structural unemployment. Frictional unemployment is more what you referenced, Damon. So I remember one time I left a position with a company by the name of Dean Witter, which is now Morgan Stanley, and I took 6 weeks off to be with my family. And I wasn't thought of as employed. I kind of was unemployed. I would have been counted as unemployed because it was so short, but it was because I chose to be. I was in transition. So frictional is things in transition. So that 6 weeks I would have been considered frictionally unemployed. I was going from one job to another. Or maybe I was laid off of a job last week because of whatever reason, and my new job that I found yesterday doesn't start for a week. Okay? I'm in transition. Or I've finished college, and now I leave my part-time job that I had in college, and I take my position in IBM in Watkins Glen, New York, and it's going to take me 2 weeks to get there and set up household before my job starts. That's frictional unemployment. Okay? And the two combined, structural unemployment plus frictional unemployment, is considered the natural level or natural rate of unemployment, which we think of that at about 5% in this country. And we think of something called the NAIRU, N-A-I-R-U, which we'll also hit again in a later discussion on unemployment. And the NAIRU is the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. Non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. Here's what it means. If unemployment stays, this natural unemployment, stays at around 5%, inflation tends to stay fairly constant and doesn't change much. If unemployment drops below 5%, we now have fewer people available to work, we have a tighter labor market, and maybe because of that, I'm an employer and I really need somebody, okay? And so, Hat, you got a good job over at Google, all right? But I really need somebody like you, and I'm willing to bid up or pay more to get you, right? Well, when people like me throughout the economy start paying more for workers, then we see inflation start to come, okay? So when unemployment dips below 5%, then we see inflation tend to start to rise. When unemployment rises above 5%, it's just the opposite phenomenon. So here you are, Nate, you need a job, don't you? You have a family, you've got 2 car payments, you've got a mortgage, you've got those student loans that are just killing you, right? You need a job like you need your next breath. It's probably not you, I'm just being, because I noticed you didn't have a wedding ring on, so I thought I'd go through this fantasy. And now he's never going to get married. And he doesn't even know if he wants to finish college. Yeah. So here you are, and you don't have a job. Remind me your first name. I'm terribly sorry. Courtney, thank you. And you go to Courtney, and because you know Courtney's hiring, and Courtney offers you $10 an hour, and you used to make $20. You don't have a job, man. You got nothing. Do you take the job?
Yeah.
You might come back to Courtney and say, Courtney, I thank you, but I really need at least 12. Courtney, there are 17 people outside your office that are equally as qualified for him as he is, because unemployment's at 9 or 12%. Do you pay him 12? You offered him 10.
Are they going to be underrepresented?
Well, you don't know that yet, but they responded to your job. You advertised it, and there's 17 of them, and they're all hungry. My guess is, he says, well, thank you, Nate. It was really nice getting to know you. Hope you have a good trip home. And Nellie's the next person. Nellie, well, you worked for 10. You just saw him get summarily dismissed at 12. You need a job. And so when we have too much unemployment, or the reserve army of labor, as Marx would put it, I'm not a Marxian economist, by the way, but I respect some of what he developed. When that gets high, then competition's fierce and competition lowers prices. And wage is the price of labor. As easy as that. Okay. And when that happens, inflation slows from our target of about 2 or 2.5%, and will start to work down towards 0. Is 0% inflation good? Why not? I think stable prices, I never challenge you when you're right, I think stable prices sound good. Why is 0% inflation bad?
I don't know, it's just, it doesn't make sense.
Well, you're saying it doesn't seem like we would observe it, right? Please, Lindy, and then Nate.
In my mind, what comes to mind for me is a growing economy would need some way to balance that out with advancing cost of living and in the production and evolution of technology.
And there's some merit to that. There really is. Nate?
It does make a lot of forecasting a lot easier. Trying to give people raises based off of the inflation rate and based off of the rates of the cost
Yeah.
of living is a difficult task.
And if I get a 10-cent an hour raise and I'm making 7 1/4 an hour, and that may not be a lot, but I'm probably appreciative if I get 10 cents an hour more. I'm not thinking about the fact that the 2.5% or inflation rate just ate most of it up. I feel better about 10 cents more an hour, right? So there is that part of this. But there's something that's even more important when we look at the entire macroeconomy. If we have 0% inflation and we have an economic bubble, an economic shock of some kind, let's say OPEC does an oil embargo. Let's say we lose a couple of nuclear power facilities in the West Coast, and all of a sudden the entire Southwest, the entire Southern California is shut down for, just like Japan was for a while, right? Or any one of a million different possibilities. If we're at 0% inflation and something like that happens, we go to deflation or negative inflation. We don't love inflation, right? We really dislike stagflation. Stagflation being where prices are rising and GDP is falling. Okay, that's bad. But the worst condition still is deflation. Why is deflation so bad? Doesn't lower prices sound good to you? I like the thought of lower prices.
The value of your money goes up.
Yeah, well, the value of your money goes up. That sounds good to me too, right? Value of my money went down in inflation.
Wouldn't that tank a lot of businesses though?
Why?
Because they put a certain amount of, capital and resources into the product. Now they can't get what they need to replace that back out.
I think you're right, but maybe not for the reason you're going after, because I'm not exactly sure what's behind your words, so let me kind of